Hey there, Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement and bringing you another edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training, where I take a concept, a strategy, a practice, something that we use in autism fitness programming to greatly benefit the lives of our autism and neurodivergent life skill athletes. And before I get started, please, like everybody says this, and I feel like it's just redundant, but like, subscribe so that you never miss a premiere of Tuesday training or any other videos that I put up. And comment if you have a question, if you have a concept that you'd like me to cover, if you have something that you've been burning to ask about increasing the beneficial effects of your fitness or adapted PE programs, leave those in the comments below. And of course, share this with people for whom it might make a big difference in integrating fitness programs that actually work for the autism and neurodivergent population. In this edition of Tuesday Training, we're going to be talking about one of those small but big practices, and that is when we can and when we should hold off on pushing, or to make it much more technical and operational, when we can increase the challenge for one of our athletes. Now, a couple of ground rules or structural things about this. This can vary from session to session with an athlete. And the most important thing, the foundation of everything, well, of course, this is what we do in autism fitness programming, is our standard operational procedure of using the PAC profile, assessing and addressing physical, adaptive, and cognitive skills as they relate to exercise for that individual in general, but also specific to that day's session. Now, some of the less desirable, because they are ineffective or problematic ways to go about this, are just pushing the athlete every time. And a lot of this comes from the faulty idea or premise of you just have to work harder and harder and harder and harder every time in fitness in that gym session. And that is not true as far as progress. Now, there is something called linear progression, and we operate on a linear progression model, generally speaking, with fitness. What does that mean? It means that every subsequent session, we try to increase something, whether it's go from 2 sets to 3 sets, or go from 8 reps to 9 reps, or go from 5 pounds to 6 pounds, or go from 10 feet to 11 feet, et cetera, et cetera. So that is something, especially early on, that we want to build into our programs, because we want some continual growth, development, and improvement. There needs to be a certain level of challenge to the body and that particular movement pattern and that particular muscle group in order to get a training effect. But, and however, and keep in mind that this is not always going to be the case for anybody, because at some point, everybody is going to plateau with an exercise. So this week you got 10 push-ups, and next week struggling to get 11, so still at 10. It's not always going to be the case that we are able to achieve that extra repetition, or that 2 pounds more or 5 pounds more, or whatever it is, on that lift, or getting that perfect range of motion, or having that motor control, particularly when we are talking about or coaching the autism and neuroadaptive population. So this needs to be kept in mind. So one of these more problematic practices, and there are a couple, is the have-to model of things, aka the you can do this model. Now, this is something for both parents and professionals. Sometimes from a physical perspective, the athlete cannot do that movement yet, or they can't complete that exercise at that particular challenge level, not because they don't want to, but because they simply don't have the underlying strength, stability, and motor planning to complete the exercise at that level of difficulty yet. The way that I like to introduce this is for someone who has never trained before, or if you're a parent or a professional, but particularly for parents that always want to push, if you've never trained before, would it make sense for me to load a bar with 200 pounds on your back and tell you to start squatting? Well, no, of course not. That's dangerous and silly. Well, yeah, it's the same thing for a lot of our neurodivergent athletes. If they've never squatted before or they've never done a push-up before, why would I give them, or why would we give them a variation or a progression of that exercise that does not meet their current level of ability, just assuming and saying, well, if we give them that level of challenge, then they're going to be able to do it? No, because that is, number one, potentially dangerous, and two, we're probably going to see a lot of movement and motor compensation. So just giving somebody something difficult is not the same as giving them an appropriate challenge. So we have to understand the exercise and what it is supposed to do and what it looks like when an athlete is not yet able to do it physically. So we don't want to push when the underlying physical capability is not there yet, because that simply does not make any sense. Just because the challenge level is at a certain point of difficulty does not mean that the athlete is just going to rise to the occasion and be able to do it. If they don't have the physical skill yet, it is incumbent on us as the professional, as the coach, as the provider of fitness programming to work that out, no pun intended, in the programming. So we give that athlete 1 rep fewer, or we give that athlete a modified variation of that exercise. The easiest thing to do is to sit from the sideline and say, oh no, do it better, or you have to do it this way, or come on, you can do that. If they can't, they can't, and saying so is not going to change that. So that is a bad practice, and it's assuming that the athlete has this skill and they are just not demonstrating it for whatever reason. So that's thing number one from the physical perspective. From the adaptive perspective, maybe an athlete is not sufficiently motivated and engaged. Maybe they're getting dysregulated in performing that exercise right now. So they do 2 repetitions or 3 repetitions, and then they start getting dysregulated. And what happens is they disengage from performing the exercise as best as they currently can. Again, this is not a have to, oh, you have to focus or you have to do it better. We want to eliminate have to, because pushing the athlete when they are under distress, or when they are getting dysregulated, or when they are under duress, or whether we may not know, it's not going to be helpful, right? Again, we're probably going to, in this case, increase anxiety and upset for the athlete if we're telling them, do it better, you got to be focused. All of the gotta be's, all of the have to's are going to undo any benefit in that session. And I'll get to one of the most important things about that in a little bit. Third, from a cognitive perspective, if the athlete does not understand the expectation for performing the exercise, what the technique is supposed to be, or they don't know how many repetitions to do right now, they don't know which weight to pick up, they don't know where to stand, they don't know how they need to be set up, the do it better, or you can do this. If someone has never seen a push-up before, and you're telling them to do a push-up, and they don't know what to do, that's on you or I, as a coach, as a practitioner, to demonstrate it for the athletes so that they understand what needs to be done, right? So from a cognitive perspective, we want to ensure as best as possible that the athlete understands the expectation for performing the exercise at the current level of capability that they have, meaning we set them up to be successful. So physically, they understand the exercise. Physically, they can do that level of exercise. Adaptively, they're sufficiently motivated. And from a cognitive perspective, they understand the expectation for the exercise, right? And what needs to be done, how many reps, etc. So the question now is, where can we start pushing? When can we challenge the athlete? And this, of course, is a case-by-case basis, but there are some basic best practices that we can follow. So best practice number one, in general, when we develop a trusting relationship with that athlete, we build an inroad to be able to not push and say, no, you have to do this, but introduce the let's try contingency. So let's try this. Or preempting that set with, you did 10 repetitions on the last set, let's try for 12 this time. All right. So you can, I think you can do 12 on this one. Let's try it out. So setting the athlete up with the expectation for success as well, instead of saying, okay, well, now you have to, or I think you can do more. All of these phrases and all of this way of approaching the communication is undermining the athlete's ability, rather than saying 12 reps, you've got this, try it out. So we don't want it to be so consequential that the athlete is getting overwhelmed or upset, or if they're not able to do the 12 reps and they're only able to do 10 right now, that it doesn't become a thing. It doesn't become a problem for the athlete. They don't feel dejected. They don't feel disrespected. So trust is a big deal. When we have that trust and that good rapport with an athlete, it means that we can start having the bandwidth, or we are allowed the opportunity to introduce a third set or a fourth set of an exercise. Visuals can be incredibly helpful here as well. So if I have 3 sets of a squat on the dry erase board and I add a 4th box, I also want to include the athlete in this process and say, hey, you did 3 sets last session. Today, let's try going for 4 sets. And I want the athlete's buy-in on that also. Now, depending on the athlete, there might be some pushback, and they may say only 3 sets. And I can say, okay, 3 sets. Or I might say, all right, 3 sets. And then if you're still feeling good, we'll go for a 4th set, or we can say, instead of a full 10 repetitions on that 4th set, go for 3 reps, right? And often what happens, if just that 3 extra repetitions, the athlete winds up doing 5 or 6 or all 10 repetitions as well, because I've given them a little bit less than what they can do on that 4th set. And they are the one who is choosing to do more. Not me, but I've created the situation, the environment, the setup for them to be successful. So when we push without earning it physically, the athlete is unlikely to be able to perform that exercise. Again, I probably wouldn't load up 200 pounds on someone's back on an Olympic bar if they've never squatted before, because from a physical perspective, it is potentially, well, probably going to be dangerous, and it's not going to be effective. So even though we want it in our heads, the athlete to be able to do this exercise, just saying it out loud doesn't increase their strength or stability or motor planning. That's where programming comes in. Even though we want it, doesn't mean it's true. It's not waving a magic wand, it's programming effectively. So this, for everybody, whether a parent or a professional, is a big deal, because we hear a lot of this in this space of, oh, you can do it, or do it better, or that is one of the most demotivating and least effective ways to go about things. From an adaptive perspective, we want to support the athlete, and when we earn the right or the opportunity to suggest, hey, you want to go for 5 more pounds, or do you want to go for an extra rep, or I think you've got this today. And that may take 2 or 3 or 4 sessions to build up to that. So you have an athlete who's doing 3 sets of overhead presses for 3 or 4 or 5 sessions, and now we gauge that this athlete is calm, they are comfortable, they are capable, they know they've got it. Now I can introduce that heavier weight, or now I can introduce that extra repetition, or now I can introduce an extra set of that exercise. That is ours to earn. It's not, again, our job as coaches to push and push and push and push. Even if we know the athlete is capable of it, from an adaptive perspective, sometimes we have to wait it out a little bit and introduce it when we know that the athlete is comfortable. Fitness is a long-term, lifelong process if we do it right. So we know if we have an athlete's buy-in, if they're sufficiently motivated, if we have that sustainability of a program, that we're going to get to it. And we can build in for adding that extra rep or adding that extra set, but it may not be this week. If an athlete is sufficiently dysregulated, that may not happen this week, but we can plan for it next week. Eventually, programming being what it is, and I was talking about linear progression earlier, eventually we do need to make some progress, because that's where fitness provides a benefit. We can do the same thing over and over and over, but eventually there needs to be some type of increase in the challenge of the exercise so that there is a training effect, so that the body gets stronger, more stable, moves better. However, for many of our autism and neurodivergent athletes, that might be a slightly longer process than with a neurotypical individual, because they have to feel comfortable and safe in performing what may well be to them a new version of that exercise, because now they're using a heavier weight, or now they're doing more repetitions. So even though it is a slight change, it's still a change. And then cognitively, understanding the expectation of that exercise is going to be a big deal. Explaining things is seldom going to work. Demonstrating and giving a little context to the exercise too. This is where tone and effective communication comes in. Hey, last week you got 3 push-ups. This week, I think you can do 4. So you'll aim for 4 on this set and go. And then we deal with it from there. If they get 4, awesome. If they're struggling after that 3rd rep, okay, we know where they are. Right? So understanding the expectation for how many need to be done, how they need to be done, etc., is also a big component. So in sum, when we want to provide the athlete with a new challenge, the question is, are they ready for it? And the questions after that are they ready for it from a physical perspective? Are they ready for it from an adaptive perspective? Are they ready for it from a cognitive perspective? And just because we want them to be able to do it does not necessarily mean that automatically they're going to be able to do it. Where they are right now is where they are right now. Over time, we do want to see an increase in their physical performance, in their ability to do that squat or do their overhead press or do that heavy carry, and improve performance, because that's the aim of our programming. However, we're not going to do that at the expense of physical safety or emotional well-being, or the athlete becoming confused and overwhelmed about what they need to do. So it is very much theory of mind, and very much the empathetic approach to coaching is, just because we want it to happen doesn't necessarily mean that it's automatically going to happen. In fact, that's seldom the case. But as we develop that positive relationship with that athlete, as we develop trust, and as they feel familiar and comfortable with each exercise, we are going to be able to scale that up and make progress as well. All of this, as with everything, always comes back to expectation management, but we can only have expectation management if we assess and address the skills in a fundamentally sound and appropriate way. And that's why we utilize the PAC profile to assess and address each one of those skills and capabilities, so we know where an athlete is at, so that we can strategically coach and support that athlete. So I'd love to know what you think about this. Pushing an athlete is not going to get them or us to where we want to be. It's just, frustration coming out. But understanding that a program can and should be long-term allows us to scaffold around it. I'd love to know what you think. Please leave comments in the comments section below. If you have a question or something you'd like me to cover in a future edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday Training, leave that in the comments below also. It helps the algo, as the kids say. And if you're ready to become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro anywhere in the world, we have over 600 certified pros globally, but we may not have you. So if you know that it's time for you to start supporting the individuals around you with extraordinary fitness and adapted PE programs, it's time for you to join the Movement for Movement and go pro. You can find all that information on autismfitness.com, certifications section. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the Movement for Movement. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.